Recently, I got my hands on the cheapest Honda VFR1200F in the country. With a clean title and new tires and some cool mods, I was super happy with the purchase. As expected though, there is some work that needs to be done to the bike, so it's time to roll up our sleeves and get busy doing what needs to be done so we can safely and confidently roll this 173 horsepower beast down the road again and put some fast miles on the odometer. First on the agenda was the air filter. If you missed my YouTube short, to get at this filter, you actually need to remove both side fairing panels and 4 fuel tank trim panels so you can raise the fuel tank up to get at the airbox. If this sounds excessive to you, it is. This is the problem when manufacturers make airboxes difficult to get at, is you get this. The 1200F and 1200X, for that matter, uses some unique fittings to secure the panels, and the seamless lines mean that the fasteners are neatly tucked in places that you have to seek out and find. No doubt, this is why when I took the airbox cover off, this is what I found. In a street bike, this was the worst air filter I've seen. I cannot stress enough how important getting clean air to your engine is. Clogged air filters noticeably rob power and make the engine burn more fuel. Cleaning the inside of the airbox was the first step. To update the filter, we're using a K&N performance filter. I use them in all my motorcycles and prefer them over a paper element type. Not everyone will agree, but the simple reason I prefer them is that they don't wear out, at least not for many years and miles, and you might not know the next time you have access to the air filter. It's frustrating to have to stop what you're doing, go out and buy another paper element filter, when the K&N filter can be washed and recharged with oil within 30 minutes. The filter comes pre-oiled, but I always add just a little extra from the recharge kit to make sure we have adequate protection. I thought initially the bike was a little muted considering it had an Akrapovic slip-on. The bike roared back to life in a noticeable difference. With the clean filter in place, the ability to set off car alarms while riding down West Georgia returned, much to my pleasure. Next up was the final drive. As mentioned in the first video on this bike, anything other than new oil was going to get changed. Well, there was no fear of that since the oil was far from new. The final drive is nothing more than a quick drain and fill. Replace the crushed washer on the drain, and Honda recommends using 80 weight hypoid gear oil. I'm using a 75-90 weight synthetic that exceeds standards for hypoid requirements. When looking for modern gear oil, you typically see this term, API GL-5. API stands for the American Petroleum Institute, and you'll find their symbol on all North American made oils. GL-5 oils are intended for gears, particularly hypoid cut gears, which are in our final drive here. The oil designation is meant to operate under a variety of high-speed shock loads and low-speed high-torque conditions. GL-5 is the highest gear oil rating available since the API discontinued the GL-6 classification. Our castor oil exceeds GL-5 ratings, so it was probably made to GL-6 requirements, but since that rating no longer exists, Castrol just says it exceeds GL-5. When I refill the final drive, I prefer to overfill and let them drain out to a proper level. This ensures we don't miss anything, and the bike only takes 3 ounces of gear oil anyways. Now it is time for a coolant flush. Motorcycle coolant flushes can be a real pain if the manufacturers don't put proper drains in the system. Sometimes you have to remove coolant hoses or the water pump to drain the motorcycle cooling system. Luckily, Honda thought to put a coolant drain on the VFR, and you simply remove one drain plug bolt at the bottom of the water pump to get at the coolant. Once you remove the drain plug, you won't see a lot of fluid until the radiator cap is removed. This is so air can get behind the draining coolant, then it runs out. Once the bulk of the coolant is out, the remaining will start to run all over the catalytic converter and heat shields that carry the coolant to the back of them, so be sure to make sure your drain pan extends far enough in that direction. Replace the drain plug and refill the coolant. A tedious job on this motorcycle since the air in the system seems to come up slowly as the coolant fills the system. Take your time, let the coolant work its way through the system, and continually add more. It's a good idea to have a catch bucket under the bike while filling the radiator. You'll spill a lot getting it into that narrow radiator fill hole. Make sure the overflow reservoir, located behind the engine by the right foot peg in this case, is filled to an adequate level as well. This fill hole looks a decent size, but the filler neck narrows quickly, so pour slowly into your funnel. Once the radiator won't take any more coolant cold, and our overflow reservoir is at a proper mark, start the bike leaving the radiator cap off. Now comes the real messy part. You have to heat up the engine so that the thermostat in the system opens and releases the air pockets. When it does this, you'll see coolant drop in the radiator. Be sure to top up the radiator with coolant. A common mistake is to not properly warm up and circulate the system. This bike actually had 2 distinct air pockets released, and once this was done, no more bubbles were visible in the coolant. To make sure you have eliminated the air, your coolant needs to circulate. Now this is done when the engine is hot and at normal operating range. The radiator fan should be on and working. If the fans have not kicked on, the engine isn't hot enough. Revving the engine helps circulate the coolant, but does make a bigger mess at the radiator cap, so do it sparingly. The VFR, as in all liquid-cooled motorcycles, uses a regular glycol and water mixture. The key here is to make sure that you have a coolant without any anti-corrosion silicate. Go! Silicates eat up rubber seals and plastic water pump impellers, and this is why you don't use them on a motorcycle. I'm using a premix Prestone coolant that's designed for imports. The first Prestone non-silicate coolant on the market was the pink-colored Dex Cool for General Motors. This particular blend is Prestone Blue, but now there's a variety of manufacturer spec coolants that have their own colors. The color is less important than making sure that you have a coolant that doesn't have any silicates in it. Most all coolants for new cars fall into this category now. Don't forget to clean off excess coolant spilt on your bike. It will smoke when it gets hot on an exhaust system. With the coolant flushed and refilled, we're not going to waste this hot engine. Now's the perfect time to change engine oil. I think Honda engineers get their jollies off by figuring out the most difficult places to put things like oil drain plugs. The VFR's drain is on the front of the pan, just behind the front header pipes. This makes a hot engine oil change a bit of a touchy situation. I'm using a long 17mm wrench to get the drain loose, and then try to do a quick swap to get the drain pan under the bike when I get the plug out while not burning myself. The oil filter, however, was stuck on, and this small filter would not budge with my filter tool. This tool is the only one I have that's made of plastic, and the tool started to strip before the filter loosened. I tried a couple of other things, but had to resort to the oldest trick for a stuck filter. Take a big screwdriver and hammer it into the filter. The screwdriver will give you the leverage to turn the filter loose. Being such a small filter, I didn't want to go all the way through to the other side on this one, but it got the job done. Once off, make sure the old filter gasket is attached to the filter. And this way you don't have to go looking for it. Not that this would be difficult on this particular bike. I'm using a high-flow racing filter to replace the Honda filter. A quality oil filter will come out of the box sealed on the business end to prevent packaging material or anything else from getting into the filter while it's being shipped. I always prime my oil filters with a bit of oil as well as the customary gasket lubrication. Racing designations add this 17mm bolt head to make removing the filter a bit easier next time we change the oil. The VFR1200 recommended engine oil is 10W30, which is a bit lighter weight, Most sport bikes will use a 1040. The Honda manual says an oil and filter change takes 3.2 liters. Subtracting from our 4-liter jug of oil, we arrive at 3.2 liters fairly quickly. Start the bike and check for leaks at the filter and drain plug. All good, turn the bike off and watch the oil level glass. When refilling the engine, a common mistake DIY oil changers make is to overfill the engine crankcase. Now I'd rather have an engine with a little less than full oil than a little overfull. Overfilling your crankcase will push oil out the crankcase vent, getting all over the inside of your airbox, and possibly even pushing out of other places, like your engine seals or the oil sight glass. Finally, we can get onto the brakes. In the case of this bike, the left front pads were severely worn, while the right were slightly less worn. I looked at the left front caliper and to see how the wear was, and this was what I actually saw on the left front. You see the left front, for some reason, is significantly more wear in it. And the rear brakes were about 80% left. The reason for this is the Honda Link brake system, where the rear brake pedal also applies brakes to the front left. The previous rider was probably heavy-handed with the rear brake and had replaced the rear pads recently, but failed to do the front since these pads cost twice as much as the rears, and replacing them you have 2 calipers, so the parts alone are 4 times the money. It also appears that the rear brake fluid was recently flushed. It is significantly cleaner than the front fluid. We're going to start at the rear brake. These Nissan calipers make replacing pads on the rear quick, since you don't even have to remove the caliper. Just the pad slide pin and the pads move out the front of the caliper. I'm using SBS sintered pads. If you want to break down on what sintered, semi-sintered, and organic mean, I have an early video that explains all this. For today, I'm just going to mention that sintered pads contain more metal in the pads and are for performance use. They don't fade in the wet and will wear out your rotors faster than an organic compound, but I would never put organics on a performance bike like this one. When seating the rear pads, just make sure the retaining spring is properly set in the back of the caliper and slide them in. I'm reusing the pad shims from the last set. They just require a little adjustment. I'm also using some silicone-based brake lubricant on the back of the pad where it seats into the spring, and then again on the slide pin. The slide pin is torqued to 18 Newton meters. So this guy is torqued to 18 Newton meters. Up front, we're going to do some additional cleaning of the pistons before replacing the pads. Using some brake clean and wiping out the brake dust will hopefully be enough for the brake system, since the sun's out and I'm itching to go for a ride. The front brakes on this Honda have 4 pads per caliper, and so they're a little tricky to install, but not bad. Again, I'm using some brake lubricant on the slide pins, which are torqued to 18 Newton meters. The caliper bolts are recommended to be replaced on this bike every time you take them off the forks. I didn't notice this until installing the pads, so I'm reusing the bolts. I'm coating them with some anti-seize on the body and then a little blue Loctite on the tip. These bolts are torqued to 45 Newton meters. And these are torqued to 45 Newton meters, the caliper bolts. I can replace them the next time I have the calipers off. For now, I think this will suffice. If you have any stories about replacing or not replacing these bolts, please go ahead and put them in the comments section. So our front brake fluid is a little dingy. Our clutch fluid not only is low, but it also looks dingy, so we're going to be flushing these fluids. Now that the pads and calipers are mounted, we can flush the front brake fluid, being sure to bleed out the brakes. I have a lot of detailed videos on bleeding brakes, but what I'm doing here is suctioning out the reservoir and then cleaning it. The brake side reservoir was pretty clean. The clutch, however, was a mess. So there's a fair amount of crap. In this case, not only did I wipe out the reservoir, I spent a little more time getting into the nooks with cotton swabs. It's likely when you do this, you'll knock this little deflection plate out of the center of the reservoir. Don't lose it. Seat it back in the proper position when you've got the reservoir clean. This plate prevents the brake fluid from squirting up and out of the reservoir when the cap is off. Once the reservoirs are clean, we can top them up with the correct fluid for your bike. Always read the reservoir cover and use the grade required by your bike. If you want more details on the different grades of fluids and what they mean, again, I have a video for that. We can now bleed the rest of the system at the caliper and slave cylinder in the case of the clutch. For the brakes, start on the left side, which is the furthest away from the brake master cylinder. Open the lower of the two bleeder valves on this bike. So we just finished bleeding this caliper. And on the left side of the bike, because of the linked brake system, there's actually two bleeder valves. There's a lower one right here and an upper one right up here. And to bleed the front brake reservoir, you'd use this one, and the rear brake reservoir for the link brake system is that top one there. We're not going to mess with the rear brake reservoir right now because the fluid is good in it. So we just finished bleeding this guy right here, and we're going to move over to the right side caliper, which only has one bleeder valve in it. Attach the vacuum bleeder and bleed the system, keeping an eye on the reservoir. Replace the fluid as needed. Once the brake fluid coming out of the caliper is as clean as the fluid going into the reservoir, you can go ahead and close the bleeder valve. Clean up any excess brake fluid quickly with some paper towels and an automotive grade brake cleaner. DOT 4 brake fluid will destroy paint, so be sure to protect your bike. For the slave cylinder on the clutch, we're repeating the process, and there's usually a bleeder valve that's accessible on the left side of your bike. You may need to refer to the shop manual if you can't find it. Before using the clutch or brakes, make sure that you have pumped the levers many times and you're happy with the feel. If they're mushy or not engaging properly, there's air in the system.
So after bleeding the brake system on your bike, one of the things you want to do is just be a little cautious on your first ride out, just in case you got an air bubble in the brakes. What can happen is that the brakes will heat up and your brakes will actually come on. You'll feel the bike drag when you get off the throttle, and eventually it'll heat up to the point where your brakes will lock up. So you got to be careful with that one.
If the fluid's not moving from the master cylinder, then there's an air blockage at the cylinder. You have to bleed the cylinder at the hose before the fluid will move into the rest of the system. Having a friend assist by holding the brake or clutch lever while you release pressure and then tighten the bleeder valve up before they release that lever can speed things up when you have a problem bleeding your hydraulic fluid.
So yeah, it's the first trip out with this bike after we completed our maintenance, and making sure that we shake it down and bike runs good. Here we go. Strong pull.
Thank you for watching. You are the reason that I do these videos. As always, your likes and subscriptions are greatly appreciated, and feel free to share this video with your forum or subgroup if you think it'll help someone else. Until next time, be sure to ride safe.